Hello, my name is Darren Coffin, and tonight I wanted to give a quick presentation on how to use routing in MvC Turbine. I think you'll find that for the most part, routing works exactly like you're used to in ASP.NET MVC, except that Turbine makes routing extendable, so you can do some pretty cool things like I'll try to show in this presentation. So to start off, I'm going to show how routing works in most MVC2 applications. So this is a default MVC application. I open up my global ASAX and there's a method called register routes that takes in a route collection, and routes are added to it here. This is fine and this is really easy to get started, but once you start getting further along in your development, you'll probably have to come back here and add another route. And the route will be specific to some controller or something neat you want to do. And then later you need to come back to it to add another route to do something different again and again and again and again. This class becomes, actually this method specifically, becomes a big grab bag for all the things you're doing in your application. And it can get a little unwieldy once you have a lot of stuff going on. So let me show you what routing looks like in Turbine. Okay. First, I'll go to my global ASAX. Please note that there's no routing here. In fact, this file is pretty clean. All I have is just a definition of the IOC container I want to use. So where's the routing? Well, I made a directory called routing. You don't have to make a directory called routing. I just did for my own sake. I made a class called default MVC routing, and sorry, you'll note that I have the default MVC routing here. Now the way this works is, you see this class implements iRoute registrator. When the Turbine application starts up, it will look for all implementations of iRoute registrator, and it will instantiate them through the IOC container, and then it will pass the route collection to each one of them. To show this, I will make a testing routing class, also implementing out registrator, and I'm going to create a new route. I'm going to change the name to funny, and the URL will be, this is a funny URL. And I'm going to type that in right. Thank you. And let's put debugging lines on each one of those. You see it hit my testing routing class. Go to the next one, and it hit default MVC routing. Sorry, I'm missing the fave icon, so it just threw there. Let me see if I can go to my new route. Oops, sorry. And I can. I just had to go to home controller, so this is where it went. Now there's no limit to how many of these implementations you can make, so in all those times you would have jumped to your global ASAX to the register routes method and just injected them in there. Instead, you can just create a new class, keep it close to your controller wherever you need to do it, and get the same thing. Now you might be asking, what about order? Because in MVC2, the order in which you put your routes in matters. I mean, there's a reason why people would put a route like this ahead of this one. Actually, in this case, they probably want to say like this. If I say funny, you'd have to put this route ahead of the default one because the default one would pick it up and this one would just get skipped over. Well, I think that is more of a problem with how we do routes in general, and this is kind of an opinion of mine, but um, for example, you know, a lot of people want to skip the routes ahead of this guy because this guy is like the big grab all for all URLs. So instead, I'm going to stick in a route constraint. This constraint is controllers in this assembly constraint. And when it starts up, it will find every controller in the application and load it into a list of strings. And then that list will be used to verify sorry, I cannot type tonight. Shift key, thank you. See, by putting this constraint in here, this convention will only match on controllers, which is what we want anyway. So this will no longer trip over most of the routes we're going to want in our application. Now this goes beyond the scope of this presentation, but I'm just throwing this out and that you know that there are other ways of handling route conflicts than ordering them in one big method. So let's get to the good stuff. What can this give you? Well, I'll show you. Now the default MVC application does not have a sitemap. Right? Well, I have a library. I call MvcTurbine.Google sitemap, which I'll add a reference to. Just MvcTurbine.Google sitemap. Add reference to my application. Now I'm going to start it up again. See, and I suddenly have a sitemap. How is that possible? Well, inside this assembly, which you can find on GitHub, I have a class called SitemappRouting, and it implements iRouteRegistrator. And the route says that if anybody tries to go to sitemap.xml, set the controller to Google Sitemap, which is also in this library, and just use that route. So just by adding a reference, I basically injected a route into my application. And in this case, I added a functioning sitemap. And not that it matters for this presentation, but just to prove that this is something that works. In this case, I just need to present some data to it. And look at that, a sitemap. So the alternative here is either I can package up that functionality into a DLL and just add a reference, or I can tell somebody to copy paste a bunch of code into global ASAX and copy a controller into controllers and do all that kind of stuff. So you can see MvC Turbine lets you write an extendable library that or application that you can just plug things into like this. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. You can do, you know, many bigger things. So anyway, this is how routing works. If you have questions, you can email me at darren@coffin.com, or you can ask a question on the Turbine group on I think it's groups.google.com. Just do a search for MvC Turbine. Thank you.